My ex-husband refused to follow our daughter's gluten-free diet because his new girlfriend said I was being controlling, so they started giving her regular food behind my back, which made her severely sick. When I tried to protect her through the courts, he gave up his parental rights and disappeared. I'm Sarah, 32F, and I need some perspective on this situation with my ex-husband Mark, 34M, and our daughter Emma, 6F. This happened 2 weeks ago and I'm still processing everything. Emma was diagnosed with celiac disease when she was just 8 months old. She had been having constant stomach issues, wasn't gaining weight properly, and was always cranky. After months of doctor visits and tests, we finally got the diagnosis. The pediatric gastroenterologist was very clear about how serious this condition is. Even tiny amounts of gluten can damage her intestines and cause long-term health problems. Mark and I were married for 4 years before we divorced 18 months ago. The divorce happened because he had been having an affair with his co-worker Jessica, 29F, for over a year. I found out through his phone when he left it unlocked one evening. The whole thing was devastating, but I tried to focus on what was best for Emma through the process. Despite everything that happened between us, Mark has always been a good father to Emma. He never missed his custody weekends and always followed the strict gluten-free protocols we established. I taught him how to read ingredient labels, which restaurants were safe, and how to avoid cross-contamination. We had a whole system worked out because Emma's health depended on it. When Emma was first diagnosed, I had to completely overhaul our kitchen. I threw out everything that contained gluten, bought new cookware to avoid contamination, and learned to cook entirely different meals. Mark seemed to understand the severity of the situation back then. He would ask detailed questions about ingredients and always double-checked everything before giving Emma any food. The gluten-free lifestyle became second nature to our family. Emma learned early on which foods she could and couldn't eat. She became really good at asking about ingredients when we were out. Other parents would sometimes comment on how mature she was for her age when it came to food safety. I was proud of how well she handled her condition. After the divorce, Mark moved in with Jessica about 6 months later. Jessica has twin boys, Tyler and Mason, both 4M, from her previous relationship. The custody arrangement is that Emma spends every other weekend with Mark and Jessica, plus one evening during the week for dinner. I always pack Emma's meals and snacks when she goes to Mark's house. I've been doing this since the divorce because it's easier than trying to coordinate gluten-free cooking between two households. Mark never complained about this arrangement. In fact, he seemed relieved that he didn't have to worry about accidentally feeding Emma something that would make her sick. 2 weeks ago, I went to pick up Emma from Mark's house on Sunday evening. She usually comes running to the door when I arrive, but this time she seemed different. She was quieter than usual and kept fidgeting in the car. About halfway home, she started complaining that her stomach hurt. This wasn't unusual because Emma sometimes gets carsick, so I didn't think much of it at first. But then she asked if we could stop at the grocery store because she wanted to look at the regular cookies in the bakery section. This was strange because Emma had never shown interest in foods she couldn't eat. She had always been very accepting of her dietary restrictions. When we got home, Emma went straight to her room instead of telling me about her weekend like she usually does. I found her lying on her bed, curled up with her stuffed elephant. She looked pale and kept holding her stomach. I asked her what she had eaten at Daddy's house, expecting to hear about the usual gluten-free meals I had packed for her. That's when she told me something that made my blood run cold. She said that Jessica had made pancakes for all the kids on Saturday morning, and Emma had eaten them too. She also mentioned eating pizza with the boys on Friday night and having regular cookies as a snack on Sunday. I asked Emma if she had told Daddy that she couldn't eat those foods. She said she had tried too, but Jessica told her it was okay because the boys were eating the same things. Emma said Mark was there when Jessica said this, and he didn't correct her. I immediately called our pediatrician's after-hours line. The nurse told me to monitor Emma for symptoms and bring her in first thing Monday morning if she wasn't feeling better. Emma spent most of that night in the bathroom. She had diarrhea, was throwing up, and running a fever. I stayed up with her, giving her small sips of water and trying to keep her comfortable. Monday morning, I took Emma to the doctor. Dr. Rodriguez was not happy when I explained what had happened. She ran some blood tests to check Emma's inflammatory markers and gave her medication to help with the stomach issues. She explained that after 6 years of being strictly gluten-free, Emma's system would be even more sensitive to gluten exposure. The doctor also reminded me that repeated gluten exposure in children with celiac disease can lead to malnutrition, stunted growth, and increased risk of other autoimmune diseases later in life. She stressed that this wasn't just about temporary stomach upset, but about Emma's long-term health and development. After the doctor's appointment, I drove Emma to school, but she was still feeling too sick to stay. I brought her home and she slept most of the day. I had to take time off work to stay with her, which meant missing an important client presentation I had been preparing for weeks. That evening, after Emma was finally feeling well enough to eat some plain rice, I called Mark. I tried to stay calm because I didn't want Emma to overhear me getting upset. I asked him to explain what had happened over the weekend. Mark's response shocked me. He said he thought I was being too strict about Emma's diet and that a little gluten wouldn't hurt her. He claimed that Jessica's boys eat everything and they're perfectly healthy, so he didn't see why Emma should be any different. When I reminded him about Emma's celiac diagnosis and everything we had learned from her doctors, he said that was years ago and maybe she had outgrown it. I explained that celiac disease is a lifelong condition that doesn't just go away, but he seemed to think I was overreacting. The conversation got heated when I told him about Emma's symptoms and the doctor visit. Mark accused me of being dramatic and said that all kids get stomach bugs sometimes. He suggested that maybe Emma was just nervous about something else and that's why she felt sick. What bothered me most was that he had made this decision without talking to me first. For 6 years, we had both been vigilant about Emma's diet. Even during our worst fights during the divorce proceedings, we never disagreed about Emma's medical needs. I couldn't understand why he would suddenly decide to ignore her doctor's orders. Mark also revealed that this wasn't the first time Emma had eaten gluten at his house. He said they had been gradually introducing regular foods over the past month to see how she would react. He claimed he was doing it slowly and carefully, but admitted he hadn't told me because he knew I would stop him. I asked to speak with Jessica, thinking maybe there had been some miscommunication about Emma's dietary needs. When Jessica got on the phone, she said she thought I was being overprotective and that Emma seemed fine eating the same foods as her boys. She mentioned that her ex-husband used food restrictions to control her during their marriage, and she didn't want to see the same thing happening to Emma. The phone call ended with Mark saying that he has equal custody rights and can make decisions about Emma's care during his parenting time. He hung up before I could respond. I spent the next few days researching my legal options. I contacted my divorce attorney to ask about modifying our custody agreement to include specific language about Emma's medical dietary needs. The attorney said it would be possible but would require going back to court and could be expensive. Emma missed 3 days of school because of her reaction to the gluten exposure. When she finally felt well enough to return, her teacher commented that she seemed tired and less focused than usual. Emma's stomach issues continued on and off for over a week. The whole situation has me questioning everything about our co-parenting arrangement. I thought Mark and I had found a way to work together despite our personal issues, but now I don't know if I can trust him to keep Emma safe during his custody time. I've been packing even more detailed instructions with Emma's meals now, including information about cross-contamination and emergency procedures if she accidentally eats gluten. But I'm worried that if Mark has decided to ignore Emma's medical needs, my instructions won't matter. Emma hasn't said much about what happened, but I can tell she's confused about why the foods that made her sick are okay for other kids to eat. She started asking more questions about her condition and seems less confident about her dietary choices when we're out in public. I'm torn between wanting to protect Emma's health and not wanting to create more conflict that might affect her relationship with her father. But after seeing how sick she got from just one weekend of gluten exposure, I don't think I can ignore this issue. So I need advice. Am I overreacting to this situation? Should I pursue legal action to modify our custody agreement, or is there another way to handle this? I feel like I'm caught between protecting my daughter's health and trying to maintain some kind of co-parenting relationship with Mark. Update 1: Things have gotten much more complicated since my original post. I want to thank everyone who responded with advice and support. I took many of your suggestions to heart, especially about documenting everything and prioritizing Emma's health above all else. The week after I made my first post, I sent Mark a certified letter outlining Emma's medical history, including copies of all her test results and doctor's notes from over the years. I also included a letter from Dr. Rodriguez explaining the serious long-term consequences of gluten exposure for someone with celiac disease. I thought maybe if Mark saw the medical evidence in writing, he would understand why this isn't something we can compromise on. Mark's response was not what I expected. Instead of acknowledging the medical information, he accused me of trying to manipulate him and use Emma's condition to control his parenting choices. He said he had been doing his own research about celiac disease and found information suggesting that many children are misdiagnosed and that strict gluten-free diets might actually be harmful to kids' social development. I was baffled by this response because Mark had been present for all of Emma's original testing and diagnosis. He had seen how sick she was as a baby before we figured out what was wrong. He had watched her thrive once we eliminated gluten from her diet. I couldn't understand how he could suddenly question something we had both witnessed firsthand. The situation escalated when Emma came home from her next weekend visit with Mark. She seemed different again, but this time it wasn't just physical symptoms. She told me that Jessica had explained to her that some doctors make mistakes and that her mommy might be wrong about the foods that make her sick. Emma asked me if it was true that she might not really need to avoid gluten. She said Jessica had told her that lots of kids eat whatever they want and grow up just fine. Emma wanted to know why she had to be different from Tyler and Mason, Jessica's boys. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Rodriguez to have Emma's celiac markers retested. Even though I was confident in the original diagnosis, I wanted to have current medical evidence to show Mark. The blood tests came back showing that Emma's inflammatory markers were elevated, confirming that she had indeed been exposed to gluten recently and that her immune system was reacting to it. Dr. Rodriguez was concerned about the situation and offered to speak with Mark directly. She said she had dealt with similar cases where divorced parents disagreed about their child's medical needs. She suggested that we might need to involve a court-appointed advocate for Emma if Mark continued to disregard medical advice. When I told Mark about the test results and offered to have him speak with Dr. Rodriguez, he declined. He said he didn't trust doctors who had a financial incentive to keep kids on restrictive diets. This comment shocked me because Dr. Rodriguez had been Emma's doctor since she was a baby, and Mark had never questioned her competence before. Around this time, I started noticing other changes in Emma's behavior after her visits with Mark. She began questioning other rules and boundaries that had never been issues before. She started asking why she had to go to bed at a certain time when Tyler and Mason stayed up later. She wondered why she couldn't watch the same movies that Jessica's boys were allowed to see. I realized that Mark and Jessica were not just disregarding Emma's dietary needs, but were actively undermining my parenting decisions in general. Emma was getting mixed messages about basic rules and expectations, which was confusing for a 6-year-old to navigate. The breaking point came during Emma's next weekend visit. I had packed her usual gluten-free meals and snacks, along with detailed instructions as always. When I went to pick her up on Sunday, Mark told me that they had thrown away all the food I packed because Emma had told them she wanted to eat the same things as everyone else. Mark said that Emma had specifically asked for regular bread and pasta, and that they saw no reason to deny her request. He claimed that Emma seemed perfectly fine after eating gluten and that maybe her previous reactions had been psychosomatic or caused by stress. When I got Emma home, she seemed okay at first. But by Monday morning, she was having stomach issues again. She missed another day of school, and I had to take time off work again to stay home with her. This was becoming a pattern that was affecting both Emma's education and my job performance. I made the decision to contact my attorney about filing for an emergency modification of our custody order. The attorney explained that courts take medical neglect seriously, especially when there's clear documentation of a child's diagnosed condition and evidence that one parent is disregarding medical advice. We filed a motion asking the court to require that Emma's gluten-free diet be strictly followed during all custody visits. We also requested that Mark be required to complete education about celiac disease before resuming unsupervised visits with Emma. Mark's reaction to being served with court papers was explosive. He called me repeatedly, accusing me of trying to turn Emma against him and using her medical condition as a weapon in our divorce battle. He said I was being vindictive and trying to punish him for moving on with Jessica. The most disturbing part of his response was when he suggested that maybe Emma didn't actually have celiac disease at all. He claimed that I had convinced myself she was sick because I needed to feel important as her mother. He said that Jessica had helped him see that I was probably suffering from some kind of disorder that made me want to keep Emma sick and dependent on me. This accusation was so far from reality that I didn't know how to respond. I had never wanted Emma to have a medical condition. The diagnosis had been devastating when she was a baby, and managing her diet had been challenging and expensive for years. The idea that I would fabricate or exaggerate her condition was beyond comprehension. Jessica also left me several voicemails during this time. She said that Emma had confided in her about feeling different from other kids because of her diet. Jessica claimed that Emma was developing anxiety about food and social situations because of my restrictions. She suggested that I was damaging Emma's psychological development by making her feel like she was sick and fragile. These messages were particularly painful because I had always worked hard to help Emma feel normal despite her dietary needs. I had taught her to advocate for herself, found ways for her to participate in birthday parties and school events, and tried to make gluten-free eating feel natural rather than restrictive. The court hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Mark's visitation continued, but I insisted on staying nearby during his custody time in case Emma had another reaction to gluten exposure. This arrangement was awkward and tense, but I felt I had no choice given the pattern of Emma getting sick after visits. During one of these supervised visits, I witnessed something that made me realize how much the situation had deteriorated. Mark was openly feeding Emma regular cookies while telling her that mommy's rules didn't apply at daddy's house. When Emma hesitated, Jessica encouraged her to eat them, saying that she shouldn't let fear control her life. Emma looked confused and conflicted. She kept glancing at me, clearly torn between wanting to please her father and knowing that these foods usually made her feel sick. It was heartbreaking to watch her struggle with this impossible choice between her parents. That evening, Emma asked me why Daddy and Jessica said different things about her food than I did. She wanted to know who was telling the truth and why grown-ups couldn't agree about something so important. I tried to explain the situation in age-appropriate terms, but I could see that she was stressed and confused by the conflicting messages. The night before our court hearing, Mark called to say that he had reconsidered his position. He claimed that he didn't want to put Emma through the stress of a custody battle and that he was willing to follow her dietary restrictions going forward. He asked me to withdraw the court motion and said we could work things out between ourselves. I was skeptical of this sudden change of heart, especially given how adamant he had been about Emma not really needing a gluten-free diet. But I was also tired of the conflict and hopeful that maybe we could find a way to co-parent effectively again. Against my attorney's advice, I agreed to postpone the court hearing to see if Mark would follow through on his promise. We arranged for a trial period where Mark would strictly follow Emma's dietary needs, and I would document any incidents or concerns. Looking back now, I should have listened to my attorney and proceeded with the court hearing. But at the time, I wanted to believe that Mark would prioritize Emma's health once he understood how serious the situation had become. Update 2: I should have gone through with the court hearing. The trial period I mentioned in my last update was a complete disaster, and now I'm dealing with consequences I never saw coming. For the first 2 weeks after Mark promised to follow Emma's dietary restrictions, things seemed to improve. Emma came home from visits without any stomach issues, and she seemed less confused about the conflicting messages she had been getting about food. I started to hope that maybe we had turned a corner and could co-parent effectively again. But then Emma started asking strange questions that made me suspicious. She wanted to know if there were different types of gluten and whether some gluten was safer than others. She asked if organic bread was okay for her to eat, and whether cookies made with wheat flour were different from cookies made with regular flour. These questions were oddly specific and didn't sound like things a 6-year-old would come up with on her own. When I asked Emma where she had heard these ideas, she said that Jessica had been teaching her about nutrition and explaining that not all gluten was the same. I realized that instead of completely stopping gluten exposure, Mark and Jessica had decided to experiment with different types of gluten-containing foods. They were apparently testing whether Emma reacted differently to organic wheat products, sourdough bread, or foods with smaller amounts of gluten. The evidence became clear when Emma came home from a weekend visit with a stomachache but insisted she hadn't eaten anything with gluten. When I pressed her for details about her meals, she mentioned eating special bread that Jessica said was made with ancient grains and was supposed to be easier to digest. I looked up the brand Emma described and found that it was a regular wheat bread marketed as artisanal and organic, but it definitely contained gluten. Jessica had apparently convinced Emma that this type of bread was safe for her to eat because it was more natural than regular bread. When I confronted Mark about this, he admitted that they had been doing what he called gradual exposure therapy. He said Jessica had read about this approach online and thought it might help Emma build tolerance to gluten over time. He claimed they were being careful and scientific about it, keeping track of what foods caused reactions and which ones seemed okay. I was furious that they were essentially conducting medical experiments on my daughter without any professional supervision. I explained that celiac disease doesn't work like an allergy where you can build tolerance through exposure. Every time Emma ate gluten, it was causing damage to her intestines whether she felt sick or not. Mark's response was that I wasn't qualified to make medical decisions for Emma because I wasn't a doctor. He said that Jessica had more education than I did and had done extensive research on alternative approaches to managing food sensitivities. This was particularly insulting because Jessica works in marketing and has no medical or nutrition background whatsoever. The situation got worse when I discovered that Mark had taken Emma to see a naturopathic practitioner without telling me. This person had apparently told them that Emma's celiac diagnosis might be wrong and that her symptoms could be caused by other factors like stress or emotional issues related to the divorce. The naturopath had recommended a special supplement program and suggested that Emma's gluten sensitivity might resolve itself if her overall health and emotional state improved. They had started giving Emma these supplements during visits, telling her they would help her be able to eat the same foods as other kids. I was appalled that Mark had taken Emma for medical consultation without involving me, especially to someone who wasn't a licensed physician. Our custody agreement required that we both consent to any medical care for Emma, but Mark argued that naturopathy wasn't really medical treatment so the rule didn't apply. When I contacted Dr. Rodriguez about this situation, she was very concerned. She explained that there are no legitimate medical treatments that can cure celiac disease or allow someone with the condition to safely consume gluten. She warned that some alternative practitioners make dangerous claims about being able to reverse autoimmune conditions through supplements or dietary changes. Dr. Rodriguez also pointed out that the supplements Emma was taking could potentially interfere with future medical testing. If we needed to retest Emma's inflammatory markers or do other diagnostic work, the supplements might affect the results and make it harder to assess her condition accurately. I demanded that Mark stop giving Emma the supplements immediately and provide me with a complete list of everything the naturopath had recommended. Mark refused, saying that he had as much right to make healthcare decisions for Emma as I did, and that he wasn't going to let me control every aspect of her medical care. This was when I realized that the situation had moved far beyond just disagreeing about diet. Mark was actively working against Emma's established medical care and involving unqualified practitioners in her treatment. He seemed to genuinely believe that Emma's celiac diagnosis was wrong or that it could be cured through alternative methods. The breaking point came when Emma had her worst reaction yet after a weekend visit. She came home with severe stomach pain, vomiting, and diarrhea that lasted for 3 days. She missed an entire week of school and lost several pounds because she couldn't keep food down. When I took her to the emergency room, the doctors found that her inflammatory markers were extremely elevated, indicating significant immune system activation from gluten exposure. They had to give her 4 fluids because she was becoming dehydrated from the vomiting and diarrhea. The ER physician was shocked when I explained the situation with Mark deliberately exposing Emma to gluten. She said this level of reaction indicated that Emma had consumed a substantial amount of gluten, not just trace amounts from cross-contamination. She recommended that we contact Child Protective Services because this constituted medical neglect. I didn't want to involve CPS, but the hospital was required to file a report based on Emma's condition and the circumstances I had described. A social worker came to interview me while Emma was still in the hospital, and I had to explain the entire situation with Mark's refusal to follow her dietary restrictions. When Mark found out about the CPS report, he was livid. He accused me of trying to destroy his relationship with Emma and using government agencies to punish him for remarrying. He claimed that Emma's reaction was coincidental and might have been caused by a stomach virus rather than gluten exposure. Jessica called me repeatedly during this time, insisting that they had been careful about Emma's diet during that particular visit. She claimed that Emma must have gotten into something without their knowledge, or that I was somehow making her sick to frame them for neglect. The accusations were becoming increasingly paranoid and detached from reality. Jessica suggested that I might be giving Emma something to make her sick, or that I was coaching her to lie about what she ate during visits. She said that Emma seemed perfectly happy and healthy at their house, and only got sick after coming home to me. CPS opened an investigation and interviewed both Mark and Jessica separately. They also spoke with Emma, Dr. Rodriguez, and Emma's teachers to get a complete picture of the situation. The caseworker told me that they take medical neglect cases very seriously, especially when there's clear documentation of a diagnosed condition and evidence that medical advice is being ignored. During this time, Mark's visits with Emma were suspended pending the outcome of the CPS investigation. Emma was relieved not to have to navigate the conflicting rules and expectations between our households, but she was also confused about why she couldn't see her father. I tried to explain the situation to Emma in age-appropriate terms, focusing on the fact that everyone who takes care of her needs to understand her medical needs and follow the same rules to keep her healthy. I avoided criticizing Mark directly, but Emma was smart enough to understand that Daddy had been making choices that weren't good for her health. The CPS investigation took about 6 weeks to complete. During that time, I had to provide extensive documentation of Emma's medical history, including all her test results, doctor's notes, and records of her reactions after visits with Mark. I also had to document the supplements he had been giving her and the involvement of the naturopathic practitioner. The investigation concluded that Mark had indeed been neglecting Emma's medical needs by deliberately exposing her to gluten despite knowing about her celiac diagnosis. The caseworker noted that Mark's refusal to accept medical advice from licensed physicians and his decision to seek alternative treatments without proper consultation constituted a pattern of medical neglect. CPS recommended that Mark's visits be supervised until he completed education about celiac disease and agreed to follow Emma's dietary restrictions without deviation. They also required that any future medical decisions for Emma be made jointly and only involve licensed healthcare providers. Mark was furious about the CPS findings and blamed me for ruining his relationship with Emma. He said that I had manipulated the system to get revenge on him for the affair and remarriage. He accused me of being vindictive and using Emma as a weapon to punish him. The supervised visits that followed were tense and awkward. Mark was resentful about having to follow strict protocols, and Emma could sense the tension between all the adults involved. She started asking fewer questions about her condition and seemed withdrawn during and after visits with her father. Update 3: The supervised visits lasted for 3 months before Mark decided he was done fighting the system. Last month, he informed me through his attorney that he was relinquishing his custody rights and moving to another state with Jessica. He said the legal requirements and supervision were too burdensome, and he felt like he couldn't have a normal relationship with Emma under these conditions. I was shocked by this decision, even though our relationship had deteriorated so badly. Whatever issues Mark and I had as ex-spouses, I never expected him to walk away from Emma entirely. She had always been the most important thing in his life, or so I thought. Emma's reaction to her father's departure was complicated. She seemed sad but also relieved that she wouldn't have to worry about conflicting rules and expectations anymore. She stopped asking questions about why different adults told her different things about her food, and her confidence about managing her dietary needs returned. The transition wasn't easy though. Emma went through a period of testing boundaries at home, probably trying to figure out if I was going to change my rules too. She asked several times if she could try eating regular bread or cookies, but seemed satisfied when I explained that her body's needs hadn't changed just because Daddy wasn't around anymore. Dr. Rodriguez helped me navigate this transition by having age-appropriate conversations with Emma about her condition. She explained that celiac disease is something Emma will have her whole life, but that it doesn't make her sick or different as long as she follows her special diet. Emma seemed to understand this better coming from her doctor than from me. The most positive development has been Emma's return to normal health patterns. Without the regular gluten exposure from visits with Mark, her inflammatory markers returned to normal levels. She stopped having the stomach issues that had become routine after custody weekends, and her energy and focus at school improved noticeably. Emma's teacher commented that she seemed more settled and confident than she had been in months. She was participating more in class activities and seemed less anxious about food-related situations like birthday parties or school events. The consistency in her care made a significant difference in her overall well-being. I had to make some practical adjustments to our routine since Mark was no longer contributing to Emma's care or expenses. I picked up additional freelance work to cover the costs that had previously been shared. Emma started attending an after-school program 2 days a week, which she actually enjoys because they have other kids with food allergies and dietary restrictions. The legal aftermath took several more weeks to resolve. Mark signed over his parental rights, which meant he was no longer responsible for child support but also had no legal standing to make decisions about Emma's care or to request visitation in the future. His attorney advised him that this was a permanent decision that couldn't be easily reversed later. I consulted with my attorney about whether to pursue this route, since it would mean Emma would lose financial support from Mark. Ultimately, I decided that the stability and safety it provided were worth more than the monthly payments. Emma's health had to be the priority, and Mark had proven that he couldn't be trusted to prioritize it during his custody time. Jessica sent me a few messages after they moved, claiming that I had destroyed a family and deprived Emma of her father's love. She said that Mark was heartbroken about losing Emma but couldn't continue fighting a system that was rigged against fathers. She suggested that someday Emma would understand what I had taken away from her. I didn't respond to these messages because there wasn't anything productive to say. Mark had made his own choices throughout this situation, from initially exposing Emma to gluten against medical advice to ultimately walking away rather than learning to manage her condition properly. I hadn't forced him to make any of these decisions. The hardest part was explaining to Emma that her daddy had moved away and wouldn't be visiting anymore. I kept the explanation simple, saying that sometimes adults make choices that are hard to understand, but that it didn't mean there was anything wrong with her or that she had done anything to cause it. Emma asked if daddy left because she was too much trouble with her special diet. This question broke my heart because it showed she had internalized some of the conflict around her medical needs. I reassured her that needing to eat different foods didn't make her difficult or troublesome, and that people who truly care about her well-being are happy to learn how to keep her healthy. We established some new routines to fill the time that Emma had previously spent with Mark. Saturday mornings became our grocery shopping and meal prep time, where Emma helps me plan gluten-free meals and snacks for the week. She's become quite good at reading ingredient labels and suggesting new foods to try. Emma also started taking a cooking class for kids at our local community center. The instructor was familiar with various dietary restrictions and helped Emma learn to prepare some of her favorite gluten-free dishes independently. This gave her a sense of competence and control over her condition that she hadn't had before. The social worker from CPS checked in with us a few times after Mark left to make sure Emma was adjusting well to the changes. She was pleased to see that Emma's health had stabilized and that she seemed more confident and secure than during the custody battle period. Looking back on this whole experience, I wish I had trusted my instincts earlier and pursued legal protection for Emma's medical needs as soon as Mark started questioning her diagnosis. I spent too much time trying to preserve a co-parenting relationship that was ultimately harmful to Emma's health and well-being. I learned that sometimes protecting your child means accepting that other people, even people who claim to love them, might not be willing or able to provide the care they need. Emma's father chose his own comfort and convenience over her medical requirements, and that choice revealed more about his character than all the arguments we had ever had. Emma is doing well now. She's healthy, confident, and secure in understanding her dietary needs. She has friends at school who know about her condition and help look out for her during lunch and snack times. She's learned to advocate for herself in social situations and doesn't seem to feel limited by her gluten-free lifestyle. We talk about her father sometimes, usually when she sees other kids with their dads or has questions about why some families look different than others. I try to be honest without being negative, explaining that sometimes adults make choices that don't work out the way everyone hoped, but that doesn't change how much she is loved and valued. The experience taught me that Emma's health and safety had to come first, even when that meant making difficult decisions about custody and family relationships. She deserved to have caregivers who understood and respected her medical needs, and I'm glad I fought to ensure she has that now. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My family turned against me when my cousin's BF left her after I witnessed her abuse. Then her kids revealed this shocking secret. I, 42F, need to get this off my chest because the situation has gotten way out of hand. My cousin Pamela, 35F, has been blowing up my phone saying I destroyed her relationship and turned her whole family against her. I honestly didn't mean for any of this to happen, but looking back, I probably should have seen the signs earlier. Pamela and I grew up together and were really close as kids. Our mothers are sisters and we lived just a few streets apart. Over the years though, we drifted apart as Pamela developed what I can only describe as a controlling personality. She went through a rough divorce 8 years ago, and since then, she's been living with her boyfriend Tom, 28M, their 1-year-old daughter Emma, and her 3 kids from her previous marriage, twins Jack and James, 15M, and their sister Katie, 13F. Tom seems like a genuinely good guy. He's been with Pamela for 6 years and works as an over-the-road truck driver to support the whole family. He usually stays out for 4 to 6 weeks at a time, which means Pamela handles most of the day-to-day parenting. I hadn't seen them in person for about 2 years due to living in a different state, but when Pamela insisted I stay at her place for Thanksgiving instead of my dad's house, I agreed thinking it would be nice to catch up. The problem started the moment I walked through the door. The first thing I noticed was how Pamela treated her older kids. She had Jack cleaning the gutters while James was mowing the lawn, and Katie was inside doing laundry and cooking dinner. Now, I'm all for teaching kids responsibility, but this felt different. These kids weren't just doing chores, they were running the entire household while Pamela sat on the couch scrolling through her phone and barking orders. The day before Thanksgiving, I watched as the twins took turns caring for baby Emma while trying to finish their homework. Katie was practically a mini-maid, cooking, cleaning, and doing everything her mother should have been doing. When I tried to help Katie with dinner, Pamela snapped at me saying her kids needed to learn responsibility and I shouldn't interfere with her parenting. Thanksgiving Day itself went smoothly mainly because Tom was home and took charge of most things. The kids seemed more relaxed with him around, and even Pamela was less demanding. After dinner, the twins went to spend the weekend with their dad, and Katie went to a friend's house for a sleepover. That's when I saw the real Pamela come out. Tom had just gotten back from a 6-week haul and was clearly exhausted. The poor guy hadn't even had time to unpack his bags when Pamela started demanding he do the dishes, clean the house, and take care of Emma all at once. When he calmly explained that he was trying to spend some time with Emma after being gone for so long, Pamela exploded. She started screaming at him about how she had to handle everything while he was gone, how he was lazy and useless, and how he needed to pull his weight around the house. Tom just stood there, gently bouncing Emma while Pamela ranted. I couldn't stand seeing him treated that way, so I offered to watch Emma so he could get some things done. Big mistake. Pamela turned her rage on me, saying I needed to mind my own business and stop undermining her authority in her own house. She accused me of trying to make her look like a bad mother and said I had no right to interfere with her family. I backed off, but the situation just kept getting worse. The next day, Jack texted saying he was staying another night at Tom's parents' house. He had been working a college football game with Tom's family, and since it was already 9 p.m., his ride didn't feel comfortable driving him home so late. It seemed like a perfectly reasonable situation. The kid was safe with family, it was late, and he'd be home the next day. But Pamela completely lost it. She demanded Tom drive an hour each way to bring Jack home immediately. When Tom suggested letting him stay the night since he was safe and with family, Pamela went ballistic. She started screaming so loud I'm sure the neighbors heard every word. She called Tom worthless, accused him of trying to turn her kids against her, and said he was a terrible father to Emma. Tom looked defeated but grabbed his keys to go get Jack. As soon as he left, Pamela snatched Emma and stormed off to their bedroom, still yelling about what a disappointment Tom was and how no one respected her authority. The baby was crying, probably scared by all the screaming, but Pamela didn't seem to care. I couldn't take it anymore. The verbal abuse, the way she treated her kids like servants, the constant screaming, it was too much. I packed my bags and went to my dad's house, leaving a brief note, thanking her for her hospitality. I forgot my watch that was charging in the guest room, so I had to go back the next morning to get it. That's when I found out Tom hadn't just gone to get Jack, he had packed up some of his and Jack's things and left. He sent Pamela a text saying he couldn't take the abuse anymore and needed space to think about their relationship. He also said he was taking Emma to stay with his parents until they could figure things out. Pamela completely lost it. She started calling and texting me nonstop, saying I had poisoned Tom against her and encouraged him to leave. She accused me of trying to steal her boyfriend, despite the 14-year age gap and the fact that I've been happily single. She's blocked me on all social media, but her kids are posting horrible things about me, clearly repeating whatever lies Pamela is telling them. The worst part is that some of our family is actually believing her version of events. My aunt, Pamela's mom, called me in tears, asking how I could break up her daughter's family right before Christmas. When I tried to explain what really happened, she accused me of being jealous of Pamela's relationship. I know I probably should have kept my mouth shut and just endured the drama until my visit was over. But watching someone being verbally abused while everyone else acts like it's normal just didn't sit right with me. Pamela's behavior was toxic and abusive, and while I never told Tom to leave, I can't say I'm sorry he finally stood up for himself. AITA for leaving and inadvertently giving Tom the courage to stand up for himself? Update 1: Things have gotten even messier since my last post, and I need to share what's been happening because it's honestly worse than I initially thought. The whole situation has revealed some dark truths about Pamela that none of us knew about. Last week, I received a friend request on Facebook from Linda, 54F, Tom's mother. At first, I was hesitant to accept it given all the drama, but I'm glad I did. She sent me a long message thanking me for being kind to her son during my stay. According to Linda, they had been watching Pamela's abusive behavior escalate for years, but Tom always made excuses for her and begged them not to interfere. Linda shared some disturbing details about their relationship. Apparently, whenever Tom was on the road, Pamela would constantly call him while he was driving, accusing him of cheating and demanding he prove where he was. If he missed a call because he was sleeping or driving, she would blow up his phone with threatening messages. Tom stayed through all of this because he loved Emma and the other kids, and Pamela had repeatedly threatened that he would never see Emma again if he left. The most shocking revelation came when Linda told me about Pamela's pattern of behavior. This wasn't her first relationship to implode this way. Her marriage to the twins and Katie's father ended under similar circumstances, but Pamela had managed to spin the story so everyone believed he was the abusive one. Linda found this out from Tom's sister, who works with the ex-husband's current wife. Linda shared screenshots of text messages Pamela had sent Tom over the years. They were horrible. She would call him worthless, say no one else would ever want him, tell him he was a terrible father, and threaten to destroy his relationship with Emma. Some messages were sent while he was literally driving his truck, putting his life at risk because she knew he would feel compelled to respond. The real gut punch came yesterday when Jack, one of the twins, messaged me on Instagram. His message started with an apology for the nasty things he had posted about me. He explained that Pamela had forced them to write those posts, standing over their shoulders and dictating what to say. She had told them I was trying to break up their family and had been flirting with Tom the entire time I was there. Jack confessed that he was actually relieved when Tom left because he couldn't stand watching history repeat itself. He said Pamela treated their dad the same way before their divorce, but they were too young then to understand what was happening. Now that they're older, they recognize the pattern of abuse. He also revealed that Pamela had been telling the kids that Tom was cheating on her with me, which explained why they had been so hostile. I decided to share these messages with my Aunt Mary, Pamela's mom, hoping she would finally see the truth about her daughter. I thought the evidence from multiple sources would help her understand what was really going on. I was wrong. Instead of listening, she accused me of working with Tom to fabricate evidence to make Pamela look bad. She said I was just jealous because Pamela had managed to find a younger, hard-working man while I was still single at my age. The irony of her not realizing this exactly proved I wasn't interested in Tom completely escaped her. Somehow Pamela found out about my conversations with Linda and Jack. She showed up at my office yesterday, screaming about how I was conspiring with her enemies to destroy her life. She caused such a scene that security had to escort her out. Now she's threatening to sue me for defamation, claiming I'm spreading lies about her to destroy her reputation and take her children away. The kids are caught in the middle of all this chaos. The twins are barely speaking to Pamela now, especially after she tried to confiscate their phones to prevent them from contacting Tom or their dad. Katie, the younger sister, is still completely under Pamela's influence, repeating her mom's version of events to anyone who will listen. Tom is trying to get partial custody of Emma, but Pamela is making it as difficult as possible, missing scheduled handoffs and making false allegations about his parenting. This morning, I got a call from my cousin Mike, Pamela's brother, telling me I need to fix this situation because Pamela has been calling their parents multiple times a day, crying about how I destroyed her life. He suggested I should just apologize to keep the peace, even if I didn't mean it. When I refused, he called me selfish and said I was tearing the family apart. I honestly don't know what to do anymore. Part of me wants to show everyone the evidence I have of Pamela's behavior, but I'm worried that would only make things worse for the kids. They're already dealing with enough trauma without their mom's abusive behavior being exposed to the entire family. At the same time, I'm tired of being painted as the villain in this story when all I did was refuse to ignore abuse. Tom's lawyer advised him not to have any direct contact with me until after the custody hearings, which I completely understand. But through Linda, I know he's doing better now that he's away from Pamela's influence. He's taken a local route so he can be more present for Emma, and he's working with his lawyer to document all of Pamela's past abuse. The whole situation is just getting worse by the day, and I have a feeling this is just the beginning of a very ugly battle. Update 2: I never expected this story to take such a dark turn. What happened last week has changed everything, and the truth about Pamela is finally coming out in ways none of us anticipated. James, one of the twins, finally broke down and told their dad Greg everything that had been happening in Pamela's house. Not just the verbal abuse we all witnessed, but years of neglect and manipulation that none of us knew about. He revealed how Pamela would regularly leave baby Emma with the teenagers for days at a time while she went out partying, claiming she needed mental health breaks. The kids were afraid to say anything because Pamela threatened to send them to a boarding school in another state if they ever told anyone about what happened at home. The twins and Katie had been covering for their mom for years. When Tom was on the road, Pamela would disappear for days, leaving the kids to care for Emma and themselves. They used their allowance and money from their part-time jobs to buy groceries because Pamela spent all the household money Tom sent on gambling. James showed his dad their text conversations where they would coordinate who would watch Emma, cook meals, and handle the housework while their mom was gone. Greg immediately contacted his lawyer and filed for emergency custody. During the hearing, years of Pamela's manipulation and abuse came to light. The judge was especially concerned about evidence showing Pamela had been forging Tom's signature on documents while he was on his long-haul trips. She had opened credit cards in his name and racked up massive debt, which Tom only discovered after he left. But the most shocking revelation came from Tom himself through his lawyer. Early in their relationship, when Tom had talked about taking a better paying job that would keep him away from home longer, Pamela claimed she was pregnant to make him stay. She then faked a miscarriage a few weeks later, only to actually get pregnant with Emma a few months after that. The timing of all this came out because she had accidentally admitted it in text messages to a friend, which Tom's lawyer obtained during discovery. The evidence of Pamela's gambling addiction was overwhelming. Bank statements showed she had been withdrawing large sums of money from Tom's account at local casinos. When the kids needed things for school or sports, she would tell them Tom hadn't sent enough money, forcing them to either go without or use their own money. All while Tom was sending more than enough to cover all household expenses. When confronted with all this evidence in court, Pamela showed absolutely no remorse. Instead, she had a complete meltdown, screaming about how everyone was conspiring against her and how we would all regret this. She accused me, Tom, Greg, and even her own kids of plotting to destroy her life. The judge had to threaten her with contempt of court to get her to calm down. Greg was granted full custody of the twins and Katie. Tom has filed for full custody of Emma and is pressing charges for identity theft and fraud. The kids are now living with Greg full-time and are starting counseling to deal with the trauma of growing up with Pamela. Even Katie, who was previously defending her mom, finally broke down and admitted how afraid she had been all these years. Our entire family is in shock. My aunt and uncle, who had been Pamela's biggest defenders, finally had to face the truth about their daughter when they saw the evidence in court. They found out Pamela had also stolen money from them, forging checks from their account. The realization that they had enabled her behavior for years has hit them hard. Pamela has been calling everyone in the family, trying to get them to take her side, but this time no one is buying her lies. The evidence is too clear, and her behavior in court showed everyone her true colors. She's been ordered to stay away from both Tom's and Greg's homes, and any contact with the kids has to be supervised. The saddest part in all of this is seeing how relieved the kids are to be away from her. They're finally able to just be teenagers instead of having to be parents to their younger sister and caretakers of their household. Tom is working with his lawyer to help the twins and Katie recover the money Pamela took from them, though no one expects to see much of it returned. I still can't believe how much damage Pamela managed to hide for so long, or how many people she hurt while maintaining an image of being a struggling single mom doing her best. The truth is finally out, but the aftermath is affecting everyone involved. Update 3. This will be my final update because I think it's time to close this chapter. The situation with Pamela has gotten both better and worse, if that makes any sense. After losing custody of all her kids, Pamela's behavior became increasingly erratic and concerning. About 2 weeks ago, she showed up at Tom's parents' house at 3 a.m., completely drunk. She started banging on their door, screaming that she wanted to see Emma. When they refused to let her in, Emma wasn't even there. She was at Tom's new place. Pamela tried to break down their door with a gardening tool she found in their yard. The neighbors called the police, and she was arrested for attempted breaking and entering, vandalism, and disturbing the peace. This wasn't her first incident since the custody hearings. She had been showing up at Greg's house during the twins' and Katie's school hours, leaving threatening notes in their mailbox. She even tried to pick Katie up from school one day, causing such a scene that the school had to go into lockdown. After the incident at Tom's parents' house, both families were able to get restraining orders against her. Pamela is now facing criminal charges for the break-in attempt, violating the custody agreement, and the financial fraud against Tom. The judge has ordered her to complete anger management classes and seek addiction treatment if she wants any chance of supervised visits with the kids. So far, she's refused to comply, insisting that she's the victim in all this. The kids are doing much better away from her influence. The twins have joined their school's football team, something Pamela never allowed because she claimed they needed to be home to help with Emma. Katie is finally able to spend time with friends instead of being stuck at home doing housework. Their grades have improved significantly now that they're not exhausted from running the household. Tom has found a local driving route that lets him be home every night with Emma. He's also started taking parenting classes, not because he needs to, but because he wants to be the best father he can be for her. The courts have granted him primary custody, with Pamela only allowed supervised visits after she completes her court-ordered programs. Most of our family has finally seen Pamela for who she really is. My aunt and uncle apologized to me for not believing me earlier. They admitted they had enabled Pamela's behavior for years, always making excuses for her actions and bailing her out of trouble. They're now in contact with Greg and Tom, trying to build relationships with their grandchildren without Pamela's interference. Pamela still maintains that I'm the one who destroyed her life. She creates new social media accounts every few days to harass me, blaming me for turning her kids and family against her. I've had to change my phone number and increase security at my workplace because of her harassment. I've gone low contact with most of that side of the family. Not because I'm angry, but because I need some distance from the whole situation. The kids know they can reach out to me anytime, and I still see them when I visit my dad, but I'm done being in the middle of family drama. Sometimes I wonder if things would have been different if I had spoken up about Pamela's behavior years ago. But I realize now that Pamela's actions are her own responsibility. She chose to abuse and manipulate the people around her, and now she's facing the consequences of those choices. The silver lining in all this is that 5 kids, including Emma, are finally in a healthy environment where they can just be kids. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let toxic people face the consequences of their own actions.